Thank you very much, Andrew. Yeah, Andrew, your work actually is quite inspiring to me, and I appreciate all the interaction that's actually happening in the chat. I'm excited to actually get to learn a little bit more about actually my audience. I was about to actually tell you a little bit about some stuff we're doing in some natural language processing work, but I guess in the interest of actually just making sure we're paying attention to our audience. I again am going to actually stop screen sharing for a second and pause, and let's have some audience participation and question answering. So feel free to turn on your mic and unmute yourself and ask whatever questions. Because if you have persisted this long, an hour and 10 minutes in, and there's seven people here that I don't know who they are, you have the opportunity to ask whatever question you want right now. All right, I'll give a tiny bit more wait time. Anyone want to ask a question? All right, there we go, here we go. We got somebody. Look, we have audience participation. Feel free, oh, yeah, unmute yourself there. Anupam?
Yeah, so Anupam Khan, I'm from India.
Nice
hello.
to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. So you have demonstrated the assessment. So does this assessment support the automated evaluation of subjective type answers? Means
like that's more like open response, right? That is not computerized, right?
Yes.
Good. So, I'm going to tell you about that. We've done a little bit of natural language processing, fancy stuff that attempts to actually do that. Do you want to hear about that work of ours?
Yes. So that means answer is a paragraph, right? So a paragraph has to be written. So how to evaluate that one? Say there is a 10 marks 10 marks is there. So I have to evaluate that out of 10. So how to evaluate that that answer?
Excellent. Good. Actually, well, I'm actually prepared to answer that question. Let me skip actually a few things and actually get to your question, which is I'm moving into actually supports for teachers, because here we're thinking about I want to actually help a teacher answer open-ended questions where we try to actually grade it, but I don't trust our stuff yet. We want to do something like Google Smart Reply. Google Smart Reply is the thing at the bottom of this thing where Google's suggesting, how do you want to answer this email? And we want to do that for teachers. We want to actually have, and these are real kids without their real names, actually, and their real answers here. And we actually want to actually suggest, like this was a picture I made 2.5 years ago, and I wrote an NSF grant to actually do. We want to do natural language processing to help actually teachers essentially not just grade, that is make the grading, but to make a comment that would actually be useful to them. We actually have, I think actually, we have millions of open-ended response questions. The computer doesn't grade. It just actually puts, the teacher can go look at it. The teacher could grade it, but most of the time here in America, we don't, when you're doing your homework, your teacher's not grading actually everything you're doing. But still anyways, lots of people have actually focused on grading. So here, I'll tell you a little bit about what we've done. So we have one paper that you could go take a look at where we basically, we paid a bunch of teachers to actually write comments back to their kids on their open-ended responses. Notice the theme here in my work. But not just grade, to write a comment. And then we try to figure out, can we figure out which comment to give to which kids at which time? So, well, this paper basically kind of said, we can grade kind of okay. What we can, turns out of the 18,000 comments that actually teachers wrote, 53% of the time, they selected one of our options and edited it, and 34% of the time, they just gave out one of these. Well, here, let me show you what those look like. I should probably actually give it to you. these are the guys and gals that actually ran the study. Here, I'll show you. Here, let me just give you concretely. Catherine Taylor, teacher in Kentucky, I talked to 2 weeks ago. She's like, oh, here. I'm like, Catherine, show your screen, and you don't mind if I use your face, right, Catherine? And she said, that's fine, Neil. So this is Catherine. She uses this one. She loves this thing that I give away for free, and she was happy. I was like, Catherine, tell me actually how my system sucks, because I'm sure there's lots of ways it sucks, right? And she's like, no, Neil, you're pretty good. Actually, when you say a 4, actually, one of these options is pretty good. And when you say a 0, actually, you're not too bad. You guys don't do very well in the middle. That is actually, which is like this version. The top kid, actually, Sachi, she actually basically, in solving the system of simultaneous linear equations, she correctly identifies 100 as the break-even point. And Ganji is the kid that does a really crappy job and basically says mountain charter is better than snowboard. And Wei, actually, or I don't know if Wei is supposed to be a male or female name. Because I made up the names. There's actually real kids that wrote these things. But this kid actually says 72. Well, she correctly identified mountain charter is better when there's 72 kids in the thing. We wanted to write some comments, which is like, hey, is it true for all instances, or try 115? Do you get the same thing? Because if the break-even point is at 100, like this student correctly identified one of the things, but didn't actually identify actually the break-even point. So anyways, you can kind of tell in our data here, which is actually kids actually would actually just take, teachers actually liked they basically liked our triaging when they were kind of, because our grading wasn't all that bad, but they were much less likely to use one of our comments if the kid's score was somewhere between 0 and 4. So there's plenty of work for us to do. Super important because this is data during COVID. Do you see this row 18 and 19 that I have highlighted here? I have row 17 highlighted, but actually you see that number in row 19? 117,000 times a teacher during COVID times wrote a comment to a kid using my system, okay, like this Catherine Taylor. We see during COVID time, and notice that's a huge spike. Teachers feel they need to send messages to their kids, like during COVID times, right? Actually, and it's not too surprisingly, because if you're a real teacher, you know you actually need to somehow stay connected. So it seems like Catherine Taylor was very excited. She also is one of our teacher trainers, and she's like, Neil, I think actually the average teacher will be more likely to give a comment just because you give them a starter. And I hadn't really thought about that. And she's like, when I train other teachers, I didn't realize she actually is someone that actually we've hired to train some other teachers. But this encourages teachers to give the open-ended questions that we want them to do anyways, right? I haven't documented that that's actually true either. But there's a really good researcher named Yeager who actually has been showing the WISE interventions. WISE interventions are a bunch of African-American boys. You're much more likely to get them to pay attention to the feedback on their essay. Like you double their actually consumption of their feedback if you actually start it with, hey, I'm giving you this negative feedback because I have high expectations and you can succeed. And I'm like, ooh, I'm dying to actually run that study where we take the teacher's comment and we just slap on, and they didn't write it, but we slap on that little thing and see, do we get the effect we actually want? And so we're trying to run that randomized control trial. We haven't done that yet. Here's a different teacher, Natalie Nickel. Kids can also upload their open-ended, they can upload images. In this case, actually, this first row, Natalie's saying, good, but label your axes. Our X and Y axes aren't labeled. And she's like, Neil, could you give us a button so I can demand the child to respond? And I was like, that's a good idea, Natalie. And that way we can turn this more into a dialogue. In this case, by the way, she also falsely thought, actually, we know how to read these images. She's like, I can't believe how good you're at these images. And I'm like, we don't actually do any image processing. Anyways, you can tell the examples I'm giving here of like, show your work or how do you know or get started are not actually good things that we actually should be saying to them. So anyways, I'm giving you some negative examples of actually where we're not succeeding well. I will say just actually on the voice processing. One project we actually did is actually one of my PhD students, Shawen Liu, third author on this paper. She teaches Chinese kids. No, she teaches American kids at Brandeis Chinese. And so she actually has all these audio files lying around where she has actually graded kids. Now, by the way, actually, if you don't know how to say 1, 2, 3 in Chinese, it's actually yi er sung. And so if you're asking actually the kid, the American kid, you know, count to 3 actually in Chinese, they should say something like that. I'm sure my tone isn't very good. Anyways, but we used actually what's called a Siamese network to try to do a better job of this. And I'm excited to actually consume TAL's actually papers on this topic, because they're probably much more sophisticated than the silly things we've started doing. But I really am a firm believer that we need to let kids actually use their own voices, and maybe actually for assistants to do some really cheap actually auto translation, so teachers can pay attention to what their kids are saying. And my job as a platform provider is to figure out how to help actually teachers fool their kids into thinking they can pay attention to more than they actually can pay attention to, because no teacher can pay attention to everything. We need to help them connect and feel like that kid feels like, hey, you know, Mr. Heffernan is paying attention to me. So anyways, we actually, one thing that I think I'd actually want to share before actually I yield the floor is one funny thing we've done. Well, funny, it's not funny. It's actually really cool. This guy named Ryan Baker, he actually used machine learning to go into classrooms using assessments and actually build up detectors of frustration, boredom, confusion, and engagement. So basically, 3,000 times, essentially, Ryan actually looked at some kid for 20 seconds and said whether they're frustrated, bored, confused, or engaged. Then we actually machine learn actually a detector of frustration, boredom, confusion, and engagement, and put that into assessments. So we can kind of tell much better than chance, actually, which kids look frustrated, boredom, confused, frustrated, bored, confused, or engaged. And so we are excited about their work. In fact, what we want to do is we want to apply that work. And Anthony Vitello, my PhD student, is trying to apply that work to kind of actually look at actually giving teachers suggested messages, not about their kids' open responses, but maybe the kid that I'll just call Gaming Ganji, who actually has been tagged as a gamer. What's the message a teacher wants to send? Like, hey, it seems like you're going too fast, please slow down. Maybe it could be a more policing message of like, you're gaming the system, I'm gonna fail you. I'm assuming that's probably not the most effective way for a teacher to actually get kids to actually take things seriously. It's probably better to actually imagine a sort of a different sort of tone. And so particularly actually, how do we get kids to be paying attention in these COVID times? Because I think lots of kids are going to start to drop off. How do we actually help teachers get their kids to know, hey, my teacher is still paying attention to me? And it probably is not like, you stop doing anything, actually, what's wrong with you? It probably should be like, is your family well? Actually, I see you haven't done your homework. Maybe that's a better tone. Anyways, it's an empirical question. We should actually try to figure that out. Anyways, by using things like our boredom, frustration, engagement sort of detectors, we clearly want to be able to help kids like, I'll call Learning Lati or Lalit, actually, hey, you started actually struggling at the beginning, but your persistence paid off. Good job. I feel like that's super important in these COVID times to actually help kids, particularly the kids that you actually say, hey, you haven't been doing stuff, but then to say, hey, look, your work, it worked for you. The fact that you did something, so you keep it up. Anyways, I think I want to actually go back to more questions. But I guess my big question is, I'm a real big believer in crowdsourcing, including even crowdsourcing new problems. In this talk, I did a very bad job of talking about other people's work. I am not the first guy to think about crowdsourcing. Jim Stigler at UCLA has this really cool thing called Coursecada you could look at. And, I have a few other slides, a few other references I want to point out of people that really do crowdsourcing work well that I respect. But before I do, I just want to say the last bit of what we do. We run something called e-trials. So if you're a researcher and you want to run a randomized control trial on our 300,000 kids, you can propose a study. It will go to Dr. Ostro, and she's actually running this. This all started because I first built assessments to run my own studies. I've published 14 randomized control trials. They're here. We looked at work examples for step-by-step scaffolding. We looked at whether you should force kids to get hints or force them to hit a button asking for a hint when they feel like it. By the way, the answer is you should not force hints upon them. You should actually let them ask for them. That causes more learning. We looked at choice of medium. That is I already told you Corinne Ostro actually was comparing video versus text. She also then went on to go, well, what if we actually give them choices of that video versus text versus we randomize them to video versus text? Turns out choice is really important. Actually, you should go read that paper. I already gave you this one about to tutor or not to tutor that have this personalization effect. But after doing a lot of these studies myself, I realized we should open this up, and I started doing other studies with other researchers. There's 8 of them that I know of. Well, I of course know of the ones I wrote. There's eight of them, actually, like Sidney DeMello at Notre Dame, now at the University of Colorado Boulder. We looked at actually comparing teacher-created videos that were just 60 seconds long and how that impacted whether they finished their homework or not. And so I get excited about this sort of stuff. So if you want to run a study, you can actually go build your own study inside assessments. You can watch a bunch of videos made by my wife that will teach you how to build your own study. And if she approves it and Corinne approves it, then we'll run it for you. I have a good audience here. I like that young lady. So let's go do experiments. Experiments are important because we need to figure out what works in education. What I'm really excited about is I got funded most recently by the Schmidt Foundation to actually build out a platform to let external researchers run their own studies. So if you want to actually run a study, you can actually come learn how to do that here. I'm super proud. Here's 9 studies that have been written by other people. You will notice my name is not on them. Emily Fife was the first person to do one. She, of course, says nice things in her paper about using a systems platform, but she had a hypothesis that seemed reasonable at the time about she actually really believed that high knowledge kids shouldn't be given feedback. You should delay feedback for them. That's not what turns out she didn't find that. I'm a huge believer in immediate feedback. So I kind of was like, I should be open-minded enough to actually recognize if this researcher's done some small scale studies in laboratories to show we should not give high knowledge kids, we shouldn't give feedback and we should give it delayed. I kind of thought, well, that could be really important. But I have yet to actually see, other than golf swings, apparently perceptual motor skills, you shouldn't actually give feedback right away. You should get them to swing the golf club a bunch of times before actually giving feedback. But it seems like in mathematics, I have yet to see really good examples where we shouldn't give immediate feedback. So if you want to run a study, you actually have to comply with our IRB terms of use. All of your data will become publicly available eventually. And probably the killer thing that I'm super excited about is then helping researchers combine KDD methods with taking action. So we have actually released a data set of 22 experiments where we actually are comparing hints versus this and blah, blah, all these different things. Can people use their cool methods to actually figure out how to actually reduce confidence intervals of treatment effects? We want to learn what works. So this paper is the first paper I'm aware of that has combined cool machine learning. In this case, we use deep learning on data before any of the studies begin to actually build a better model that will predict which kids will finish their homework. Then we actually made a bunch of experiments, and then we basically showed that if you just use the data from the experiments, you don't do as well as if you actually used our prior data to first build this machine learned model that will make predictions. Anyways, I'm super excited about that stuff. I think I want to stop and actually say All right, there were some slides I wanted to say about giving actually credit to a bunch of other people that do crowdsourcing. There's like obviously Stack Overflow and Reddit, but Teachers Paying Teachers is actually a sort of thing. There's a bunch of people that have actually done work that I respect enormously. Paul Denny, Hassan Kovari, and actually Samir Bhatnagar actually have various crowdsourcing ways of getting stuff from kids. I didn't even talk to you about kids. The previously mentioned actually Jake Whitehill actually that was mentioned about the GLAD system where he does crowdsourcing. He and I, well, his office is right next to mine, and we work together on a bunch of actually projects. And I really want to give a big shout out to Yoo-Hoo Kim, who's in Korea, and he does really killer work too on this crowdsourcing. So I think crowdsourcing I think is really important. And in these pandemic times, we need to build technologies that can actually allow teachers that are doing some actually online tutoring. By the way, the United Kingdom is going to spend $1 billion on actually one-on-one tutoring. Netherlands has announced they're going to drop $250 million on one-on-one tutoring. Tennessee has committed already $1 million to actually 1,000 people to do tutoring, where they're going to hire recent graduates that can't get real jobs actually and put them to work tutoring. I think it's going to be a huge waste because we're going to actually have thousands of like tiny little Zoom recorded sessions where we're actually a human is trying to teach some other kid. How do we crowdsource small bits of tutoring, like little explanations and motivational messages, and then apply them on others? And so that's the sort of thing I want to do with my life, and that those types of tools we're building. And so I want to combine a tool that actually allows teachers to actually help their kids while actually helping others. All right, I'm going to yield the stage and stop sharing, and the slides are set up for my colleague Zitao. I'm going to hand it back to you, Zitao. You're in charge.
Hi, Neil. I think there are some questions. You want to see the question first?
Sure. If you want to tell me, if you've been re-looking at them, feel free to tell me. And this is a small group. Go ahead and unmute yourself. Ask your question.
I think I need to unmute everyone.
Oh, okay.
I think. Sure.
Oh, I'm hitting the button saying allow participants to unmute themselves. So go ahead and unmute yourself now. I just made it. Share your mailing list. And Halima actually.
Yeah, that's me again. The bigger question was around the type of feedback that teachers were giving students. So I noticed you analyzed text, you analyzed with natural language processing, but if anyone looked at, for example, if using video, the teacher used their body. And this goes back to one of the earlier talks that was in the session when it was like DDR and the participants were, doing the graphs. That's amazing. Were they doing things like that, or have you looked at the modality of the feedback in that way?
Yeah. We have not. There's so many things that we have.
I'm all about it. Let me get on e-trials.
I will say that actually one of my friends, Ido Roll, and I were just talking about what I think could really be important is actually eye contact. Okay. I was thinking about running a randomized control trial where we actually train teachers to really make sure they put their stupid little faces near their camera. Because right now I'm looking at you. I wonder, do I have a higher actually percent chance of audience participation, or are you taking my comments seriously when I've done a really good job of making sure, I'm saying to you, Halima, I recognize you haven't actually done anything in 3 days. Like, is your family okay? As opposed to when they, like many of us actually when giving Zoom talks, we actually have our little faces down here. I'm looking down in this bottom left corner. Like, is eye contact really important? I bet it is. I want to run a study on that because my intuition is what we're missing during these COVID times is the feeling my teacher is paying attention to me. And so, but anyways, yeah. What else?
I think Sherry have a question. Oh, okay.
Yes. Do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Sherry. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks, Neil. Very interesting talk.
Thank
I have tried to look at assessment data for my research. What I usually do is because if if the problems that students are doing or are trying are usually sorted and ordered in the same way, the variability in those are kind of not enough to be able to capture their knowledge. What I do is a lot of student knowledge modeling. So my question is, do you have that kind of experiments in your platform in which not all of these students are following the same sequence of problems?
So, right, so we definitely actually have both, meaning actually, so inside inside my platform, we actually have data sets, and I'll share my screen for a second and actually bring you to them. And so there's definitely versions inside my world where the kids are doing stuff at different rates. And I'll just go to my Google Sites page because I have my classic sites where we actually started storing a bunch of this data. What tends to be actually the papers that actually tended to have been replicated a lot with open data is particularly what we call this 2009-2010 data set. I think 20 different papers have been written. Most of the people they look at the skill builder data. The skill builder data is the stuff where they get 3 right in a row. Lots of people don't actually bother paying attention to the non-skill builder data, the data where, hey, a teacher kind of says, all of you do problem 5, 7, and 12. I feel like actually many times us researchers have focused on like the data sets that other people are using, and so because like, hey, I can compare to that, but I feel like actually well, anyways, I'm trying to actually impose upon our own team ways of actually making sure people can better understand what they're looking at when they run these things. Because my data sets have been used a lot, and I kind of feel like, I remember 30 years ago, someone telling me, running competitions can sometimes be dangerous because it focuses a bunch of researchers to all focus on the same thing and not focus on other things. And I feel like maybe I diluted the world into thinking slightly better prediction of which kids are going to get which questions right is useful. I no longer really think that's very important. Like I've published, and I've got best paper awards for like papers that I kind of feel like this isn't very important, right? Like until we actually can connect slightly, or better prediction to better action, none of it really matters. That's why that work that I was referring to that Anthony Botello and actually Adam Sales did, where we actually release not just data sets, not just like the data, but actually experiments, where you can then actually do something really worthwhile to try to actually say, hey, can you figure out who we should, essentially, which kid should we give which thing to? It seems like a much more actionable actually activity. So I'm super excited about those data sets in particular, and I'm glad of the people. I've already seen several people start using those data sets because I think that's just a more important problem. Like who we should give what to seems more important than can we slightly better predict actually who's going to get which questions right. I don't know, did I help at all, Sherry?
Yeah, I think so. So basically, to summarize, it is possible to try, for example, recommendation algorithms on assessments, basically that suggests.
So you can't, we right now don't have like a live API where actually your recommendation algorithm will actually decide which problem to suggest kids to do. Like we don't do that live. We release these data sets. Can you, given that, can you still try recommendation algorithms?
Offline, you mean?
Well, yeah, well, like my mind is simple. When I hear someone saying, can I try recommendation algorithms? It would seem to be that you're actually saying, can I actually make suggestions in real time to real kids inside assessments?
Right, exactly.
No, we don't allow that. Like that's a much bigger deal. Though I suppose, by the way, you could come to eTrials and talk Corinne Ostro into saying, I want to run this experiment, right? And now that's a bigger deal. You have to go make an experiment, and presumably we actually do have a way. We have a way for you to do that in a very small scale way, where you could actually randomly assign half the kids into, they solve these 12 problems, and these other kids, we actually let your recommendation algorithm suggest some things to them. Like,
Yeah.
So in theory, that's possible. To do a good job of doing the recommendation, technically speaking, you would probably love to know, I want to get in real time all the information that each kid has done so far to then try to do a better recommendation. And we have not actually closed that gap where you can actually suck down data in real time from all these kids and to do that. So you should definitely talk to Corinne Ostro. Like, we might get half of the way, but we're not going to really get exactly what you want probably but we should learn about that request because maybe we should actually build out better infrastructure to allow recommendation algorithms to run.
That would be great. Thank you.
Sure.
So I'm sorry, can I ask a question?
Of course.
Okay, sure. I just want to turn my video on.
Yeah, please do.
Guys, so Slobodan Vusaid, I come from Temple.
Excellent.
So it's a very exciting work that you're doing, just amazing, I think, and also obviously very timely. I have some comments, I think maybe following up on what you mentioned about the kind of AI. So you jokingly said you don't really believe in AI. I'm kind of thinking basically on what you're doing, you would really benefit a lot if, let's suppose, NLP was more advanced, or computer vision,
Yes.
and those kinds of things. So I kind of wanted to hear your comments, kind of like, what would you wish that AI could do, like in particular with NLP and computer vision in mind? What would you like to see that would really, advance your research or kind of help in your research?
Yeah, right. Because of course I was kind of joking, right? Like, of course I teach AI, right? Like, but I'm like, but I think everyone thinks the key thing to do is make the computer decide what to do, right? And I'm like, no, I think the thing that is being forgotten too much is, how do we make sure the teacher is in that loop, right? And so, like, how do we help a teacher quickly determine, whoa, Solvalan all of a sudden stopped doing his homework. Like, if the teacher doesn't notice that really quickly, right? Like, then she or she can't interact quickly, right? Actually, and so being able to detect stuff like that seems important. And I guess, like, or hey, Slobodan used to write good explanations. The quality of his explanations is, he's basically gaming now, right? His explanations are really crappy. Or I guess even worse, because Slobodan starts talking about how he wants to kill himself, right? Like, wow, we got to make sure the teacher hears that, right? Like, and so obviously we would like actually better AI sort of technology looking at our open-ended questions, or the students' answers to open-ended responses, so that we can highlight particularly the moments where it's really important for action. I do think my system, right now, we spew all this data to teachers. We give them a matrix of, here's the 12 problems and the 25 kids, and you can see all your data. And I'm like, this is so stupid, right? We need to actually help them see who has changed from yesterday, right? Like, most of the kids are probably succeeding, and you want to, like, ignore them, right? And I like saying these controversial things, right? But that's what teachers have to do. They have to get kids on track and then ignore them, so they can then go figure out the few kids they should go focus on, right? That, are good. And so, anyways, I think better NLP sort of would be good. I'm also excited to actually get kids being able to speak their explanations, because I bet they'll speak a lot more than they'll write, and that then just makes our natural language processing and text speech stuff even harder. I actually, for one, am like crap, do I have to get really good at that too? Like that seems hard. But we got to let that happen. We got to let actually kids, because they'll speak a lot more than they will write. I'm kind of assuming that actually, just like my iPhone, who will actually will listen to actually my pharmacy say your prescriptions are due, and then I get a text message. Apple's telling me, hey, and the text message isn't perfect, but I can basically tell it's time for me to go pick up my prescriptions actually at Stop and Shop. Why don't we have that for teachers, right? I mean, teachers should be able to, we should be able to take all the kids, what they wrote, and then say, these are the kids that I think you should say something to. And like, that seems to be the most important thing in America right now. It's clearly going to involve AI. I don't know, that's what gets me excited.
Yeah, so maybe if I can ask, I have a lot of questions. Maybe I can ask one or two more if nobody else wants to.
Go ahead and ask another one. Go ahead, and then
Sure.
we'll see if these other people that didn't turn on their video actually whether I should let them ask a question. But actually, go ahead.
So that crowdsourcing topic, right? So when you have, as you said, you had tens or hundreds of thousands of teachers, right? That are experts in teaching, right? And then everybody's still watching Khan Academy. So how far did you go there? I mean, I'm really wondering. Yeah, you probably have amongst 100,000 teachers, you have 10,000 extremely good teachers, and then maybe 1,000 amazingly good teachers, and so kind of. How do you go around that? And that's what I thought also NLP is maybe one of the things, and also kind of recommendation systems is another thing. How do you find the best answers and match or do personalization, match them with the right students? What is the state of the art right now in your lab?
I feel like we are slightly above the stage when humanity stopped using leeches to cure disease. Like I think like we are nowhere, right? Like the state of the art sucks at this, right? Like computers helping teachers figure out who to talk to when. Like it feels like most of my colleagues have said, oh, the way to apply AI is build machines to talk to kids and leave the teacher out of the loop, right? Because that's easier to do. It's like really easy to just build something and then force kids to go do stuff. But we kind of know online learning sucks, right? Actually, lots of kids drop out, right? There's the really motivated kids that can persist, and I already told this story of my own son who actually dropped out and has failed 2 online classes already. And he's used to human teachers matter. Anyways, so I lost the thread of what I was going to say.
Yeah. So basically, kind of my question, for example, would be: let's suppose each teacher decides to make few videos answering typical mistakes that kids are making, right? And then now you're explaining it in a minute. Let's suppose everybody has 1 minute video, or maybe type something in. But now you have maybe like 10,000 teachers joining in, everybody wanting to give an answer for that, right? How do you discover who is really the best, or how do you I don't want to say how do you reward everybody,
right? Right. I like one thing, maybe one hypothesis I have, which is Mark Staniporn did a great job of building this teacher assist system and showing that we can crowdsource explanations. Explanations are probably the easy part of teaching. It's kind of like crowdsourcing the lectures. MOOCs crowdsourced lectures, or I guess didn't really crowdsource them. Pay some professor at Harvard to put his lectures online, right? Type of thing. The motivational messages, they probably need to be personalized, right? Meaning like the hard part about education is probably like, how do you make sure everyone stays engaged? And so, so there's part of me that thinks the way platforms need to work is I probably need to make it so that when you are a teacher and you want to actually start, well, here, please video record yourself actually saying, how do you want to talk to a kid who stopped doing work for a minute, right? Where I basically get them to make actually 63-second actually long video we can actually give them at the right time. And now we gotta, the problem is that actually, if the kids figure out the computer is doing all this and the teacher has no idea what's going on, then the gig will be up and they'll realize, oh, this is just a joke, right? The computer is in charge of all this, right? So if the teacher is not intimately in the loop, and I'm sure there's gobs of teachers that actually used assessments to assign stuff during COVID time, and in fact, never logged back in to check and see what happened. In fact, I actually found 600 teachers who assigned stuff in assessments and they never looked at a report. And I'm like, oh my God, like, do these people know? So I started running an experiment where actually I sent out, I ran a randomized control trial where I actually had one message, one email saying, hey, glad to see you actually had kids do something. There's a report. I probably didn't use the snarky voice of like, idiot, actually click here, but actually we basically said click here. We had another one that said, here's how you go find your reports. And then we had the control, which is nothing, right? We totally failed at actually getting these teachers to actually go look at their reports. I suspect we failed because I think we got tagged as spammers and I think the emails didn't really go out. My student sent them out as fast as they could go. And I think if you want to actually make it not look like a spammer, you need to actually send out these things on Python and with delay loops. But I'm actively involved in this because I'm like, these are 600 teachers. I couldn't care less what they do with them. Right? Like, as far as I'm concerned, they're dead to me. Meaning if you don't look at our reports, then in fact, I probably want to actually make it impossible for you to assign more than 10 things without looking at a report. Like I'm banning you, right? And like you do not deserve to use my system if you actually don't look at your reports. My wife would be happy for me to ban everyone. If you don't look at your reports, you can't assign something again. I don't know. Did I answer your questions?
Yeah. Oh no, definitely. So maybe I kind of, again, I have so many questions. Can I ask one more?
Sure. Just to tell you what, you have the guts to put your video on. So I'm going to pause you 1 second. Does anyone else have the guts to put their video on? In which case, then they can ask a question.
Real quick question on what you were just talking about. Do you tell them how to use the report?
We try. We have a bunch of professional development materials. Like my wife and like 3 full-time people try to do nothing other than to try to teach teachers how to use these reports. Okay. But I think it's, I don't know, do they always read everything? Actually, who knows, right?
But there's at least scaffolding. Okay. Yeah.
We try, but we don't always fail. Brian, she's on the deck. COVID times, my brother-in-law has just walked in and said, Heffernan's. Other question?
Oh yeah, so for maybe one more from me. So you mostly, I think, talking about middle school, right? And mostly something math oriented, right?
Yeah.
So, and then I see that you mentioned you want to expand maybe to high school and stuff like that. So I'm kind of wondering what are the boundaries of what you have right now versus where can you go in terms of what are the subjects that are appropriate for a system like yours? I'm thinking about, history or biology, kind of all kinds of things. And also, how about maybe, let's suppose university education, it's kind of probably different problems. Yeah, their motivation is one, maybe less of an issue than in middle school. Students are a little bit more mature. But then I guess we are at universities, we're struggling with very, very similar issues, right?
Right. I will say just on the university side, so I teach AI, as I've mentioned several times already, and I wind up actually faking. Well, here's what I do. Halfway through my AI class, I pull down one of their open-ended questions, and I send an email to the kid, and I pull down one of their open-ended questions, and in the first day of class, I actually ask something, and then I actually then write a comment back, so they can see, oh, Dr. Heffernan read my thing, and I usually complain about what they did wrong or whatever. And so anyway, so I send out an email. I then tell them about their quizzes, and I'm usually asking them what happened on quiz 2. And I try to actually do this in essentially an automated fashion, right? I get my assistant usually to actually come over and just see, here, do the next 50 kids for me, right? Actually, where it feels like it's personalized, right? And I'm trying to actually do something that is kind of templatized, but yet feels personal because, well, I certainly know Dr. Heffernan must have read my thing. So I get back these emails saying, no professor at WPI has ever been this nice to me, right? And I'm working really hard to try to spend as few seconds as possible per kid to get through this, right? And because that's the reality, right? And in fact, I want to, instead of doing this once a semester, do it a few times, right? Actually, so, because like, we really want to catch these kids when they're about to like stop working, right? Because half the time I feel bad, like, oh crap, I waited till half the way through the term. And now I'm finally making them be aware that I'm really trying to pay attention. Anyways, it seems like there's certainly some cool systems. I can think of this Purdue system that is actually, that attempts to try to do something like this, but I don't know, there's something about how do we build support so that teachers can do the minimum amount of work possible to actually feel personalized. It seems, I don't know, important at the university level. Mm-hmm. I've started, by the way, I've started actually sending lots of videos. I use Camtasia to capture myself on video and then I send a message to a kid, which is like, hey, I was looking at your thing. I think it's so much more powerful than the text message that actually I might have copy and pasted from someone else's, right? And because if you really get a message from your professor, Slobodan, that actually says, hey, Slobodan, I see that your message actually wasn't really that clear. Did you understand, or do you need to ask me a question? Like, you're gonna look and say, oh, he actually bothered paying attention, right? Like, they could tell this is not copy and pasted. I was thinking about when Sitao's actually talk was going on, which is like, could we automate the human thing? Or would that be really scary, where we actually have me saying, you know, recording, hey, what happened on question 5? And that we're actually taking Heffernan's voice and actually slapping in, hi, Slobodan, actually, what happened on question 5, right? Like, do I want to get into that business of actually faking voices? Like, I don't know. Yeah, I probably don't, but it kind of seems like that's what I'm asking for almost, right? It seems like I'm asking for, how do we build technologies to help teachers do their thing of connecting? And that one's probably too extreme. Yeah, but those are my thoughts.
How about the subject? So let's suppose history.
Oh, yeah, I'm so scared to actually move away from math, because like math, we at least have all this quantitative stuff that we kind of know. Like, it seems so much harder. I was a history and computer science major, and I'm like, oh, it's so much easier to do math, right? Because like, at least we can have this quick ground truth on something. Hopefully someday we'll get much smarter, but I'm not even attempting to do that. It just seems like way out of my realm to succeed in history. Yeah.
It seems to me, yeah, that I think it's much easier to scale quantitative subjects, right?
Yeah.
Than qualitative, you know. Basically, I don't see that anytime soon we'll be able to do, you know, to scale up any of those kind of discussions.
I will say, oh, so by the way, so I did a crappy job thinking I shouldn't bother telling you about anybody else I respect. Maybe it's time to go back to that, because like this guy here, Samir Bhattacharya's Delight system, he has this really cool system that actually allows you to asynchronous peer instruction in MOOCs. I'm going to put that in the chat so to make sure you actually have that, because that guy, he's got a really cool system that actually allows him to ask the open-ended sort of like, he mostly did it in physics, where he actually asks a multiple choice question, then he asks for an explanation. So he's tying the words that you actually write to explain this. Then he actually gives you an option about, here's 3 other kids' explanations that agreed with your responses. Here's 3 others that agreed with response D. Which ones do you like or dislike, right? And then and only then does he then tell you, here's a good explanation. right? I want to mimic that actually, because I want to make assessments do stuff like that, because I'm like, ooh, we can then do basically the kids are doing the natural language processing for us by taking their response and tagging it with other responses that, oh yeah, I agree with that. They're basically, yet we can still do some NLP, which is if we do a good job of NLP, we can maybe be more likely to put up options that they will agree with, that were maybe like the one that they kind of said. Anyways, he uses this system not just in actually quantitative subjects, but in ethics classes and whatnot. And I think his design is right, meaning get kids to explain something, have some little activity that is computer amenable to understanding what's going on. We should easily be able to see, oh, that Slobodan guy, he just Christmas trees the answers. He clearly isn't paying attention. So the teacher can be like, Slobodan, the inter-rater reliability actually metric on you is awful. That means you're just guessing, right? Or probably is the case. Like I could tell you're a gamer. I don't know. Take a look at his system and these other guys that I referred to, because I am not the only dude that actually thinks crowdsourcing is important. Like it's so obvious. 10 years from now, someone will have done like the Wikipedia thing at scale. Excellent, Halima. I'm glad you're going to log into eTrials. I should stop. Oh, someone put it on their video. They get to ask a question if they turn on their video. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry. Yeah. So we are moving from a physical classroom-based system to online mode, isn't it? So we are gradually moving towards that. So how do you think that means how this assessment and all other exam kind of thing? So how you ensure that the students are not cheating? Means during the exam they are not cheating.
Right. I definitely don't even attack that problem. Like actually, if we're supporting all their work during their homework, I basically like we do some stuff to make it difficult to get the answers. Like actually, but I still believe in standardized tests, and it's useful to actually have exams where we really know you did something. Like I'm helping my own boys. That boy that you might have seen, the 16-year-old, he's got to get into college and he's got to be able to sit down and take an AP exam and pass American history and physics so that some college can actually put a stamp and will believe that guy learned something, right? Actually, and so I am not skeptical about all these exams because like I think exams have some value. And I do not want assessments to be the exam. Like some of my friends running these systems want to be like, oh, we'll certify the kid. I'm like, but then you actually have to care about all this anti-cheating stuff. Anyways, I think it's good that actually the number of times we have to really sit down and really care about actually cheating should be really small. Like, but I bet Gillette Stadium, which is the football stadium that the New England Patriots actually have down the road, will be full of kids 6 feet apart taking AP exams, right? Because like exams matter in this, not just in this country, the exams matter. Individual performance on some stuff where you kind of pay attention, but we're not going to do that every day, right? Like actually cheating, we can't let our fear of cheating actually like think that's all we need to do and care about, right? Like, because most of the time it's about learning. And so I like to keep assessment and learning separate. It's just, like the real assessment, like the state level sorts of tests. All right, Zitao, you should probably shut us off. I've done a good job of getting the room to get cleared.
Cool.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you actually, you three for actually turning on your video, because I like humans. I like looking at them. And I'm not going to remember anyone else who didn't turn on their video, though Sherry, she said she's got her kids and trying to have lunch, and I got to respect that. But I don't know, I think I'm a human. I think like humans care about faces and humans. And it's really hard to care about an email address. So, all right, with that said, Sitao, take us home.
Yeah, so since we are already being late, so I'll just do a quick, the quick wrap up. Okay. Okay, the conclusions and the future outlook. So we already have a series of presentation talking about how to apply AI in education. So I believe that personally, I believe that the potential for AI is in the teaching and development of knowledge cannot be underestimated. So actually, we already see a lot of kind of AI driven product in the market actually. However, it is useful in education in terms of separate out how AI can help learners and teachers. So that's why I list a few kind of points to summarize how AI can help learners. For example, personalized learning, we already have discussed quite a bit, and also individualized feedback. You already mentioned a few things about that. And also the repetitions and the practice supporting collaborations, how AI how AI system can be used to monitor some of the collaborations, and the kind of manage the how do we use the AI to encourage and manage those kind of collaboration working environment. And also AI can help a lot on teacher side. So I believe the AI system will change the nature of what is taught by the teachers. And also the AI system can help teachers to assess and monitor student progress. As Neil also mentioned, the assessment system also did a part of that. Okay. And to summarize, I believe the development and the application of AI bring the rapid change to almost every aspect of the life, also include the educations. And we hope more people from different communities, especially for the KDD community, will pay more attention to the education field, and the people will be more open to all the data mining research on education. Yeah. That here I just leave a few references about all the work. So we will put all the slides and the videos on the website. Yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Excellent. We'll stand here at the podium for a little bit. We'll pretend like this is a real conference so you can ask the speaker stuff. But thank you all for coming.